Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you back for the February edition of the Dependency-Track community meeting. Organizational parts, as always, community meetings are recorded and they will be uploaded to YouTube after this meeting, as well as the slides they will be published to the Dependency-Track community repository on GitHub. If you have questions, you can ask them in the Zoom chat while the presentation is ongoing. But there will also be an open Q&A section towards the end. You should all be able to unmute yourself, so you don't have to type in the chat if you don't want to. You can just raise your voice, I guess, and talk. As for the agenda for today, I will talk a little bit about the upcoming version 4.14 release. I will give, just as the recent times, a few telemetry insights. I will give an update on the version 5 that we are working on. And then, as I said, towards the end, there's the Q&A where you can ask questions. As for the upcoming releases, that is version 4.14.0. If you tuned in last time or you watched the recording from last time, you may have noticed that I said it is going to be released within the next 2 weeks. Obviously, that did not happen for various reasons. But one of the reasons was that we realized that vulnerability matching logic needs a bit more work. We have done some changes in this version that makes vulnerability matching ecosystem aware. I will show you in a moment what that really means. So ecosystem awareness really means that if you have Debian versions that have all kinds of suffixes or tilde, dep, and then number, u, number, etc., that if you have those versions that you apply the correct algorithm, right, to compare them. Debian has a specific algorithm. There's a specific algorithm for Python versions under PEP 440. RPM packages have a specific algorithm, Maven, NPM, and so on and so forth. We now recognize these patterns based on the package URL type, for example, and apply the correct algorithm to do more precise version comparisons, which should lead to more accurate vulnerability analysis findings, for example. As I mentioned, more examples are there, but one missing part that is the culprit here is that you also need to take distribution releases into consideration. And that is a little bit more complex, and I will show you a bit how that is supposed to work. If you look at how OSV, so this is a screenshot from the osv.dev website. If you look at how OSV reports vulnerabilities for, in this case, Debian, you can see here I selected Debian 12 for a vulnerability in core utils. You can see the package URL contains the type as deb, then the namespace is Debian for the Debian distribution, then the package name, and then there's a qualifier for the architecture, but in this case it's source. What is not here is a distribution identifier. But the distribution identifier is in the ecosystem name, which is Debian:12, so Debian 12. When you look at the affected ranges here, you can see that it is that all versions, or that the vulnerability was introduced in version 0, but there's no upper bounds, and this is equivalent to all versions are affected by this vulnerability. If you now look at the same vulnerability for Debian 13 here, you may see that the affected ranges now have an upper bound. So all versions leading up to version 9.4-1 are affected. But this only applies to Debian 13, not to Debian 12. So the issue here is you can get massive overreporting if you don't take the distribution release version into consideration, right? If you just have your Perl, it says core utils, and the version is greater than 0, then if you don't take the Debian release into consideration, it's vulnerable by all intents and purposes. The problem also, as you just have seen, the distribution release is not always part of the Perl. Sometimes it is. I've seen it being the case for Ubuntu, for example. And this is something that the upstream distribution controls, right? So Debian is in control of this Perl, as far as I understand, just like Ubuntu is. So in this case, if it is not part of the Perl, you have to infer it from the OSV ecosystem name. What makes this a little bit more complex is that not only can you have Debian 13, you can also have the code name for the distribution release. For Debian 13, it's Trixie. So if you look at what you typically have in your BOM as components, you will see stuff like this. There will be a distro qualifier in the package URL. And sometimes it's Debian-13.3. Sometimes it's just Trixie, in which case you have to rely on the namespace being Debian. And then you can deduce, hey, this is Debian Trixie. And then you need to map to an actual version, which is fun. You can also just have a version here. And again, this would rely on the namespace being Debian combined with the distribution 13, Debian 13. And sometimes you have nothing at all, which is also fun. So to summarize this, the problem is that 13 can mean Debian 13, can mean Debian 13.3 or Debian 13. something, and that is equal to Trixie. The same is true for Ubuntu, and then again, it has special notations in OSV as well. So they have LTS, they have Pro versions of their distributions. And to make this matching work reliably, you have to be aware of all of these different notations, right? And be able to map between them such that when OSV says Debian 13 is vulnerable and you get a package URL that says Debian Trixie, you need to correlate the two, right? Otherwise, the matching won't work. And I think this is also true for multiple other distributions, not just Debian and Ubuntu. The problem is you cannot reliably deduce that Trixie is the same as Debian 13, right? That requires external knowledge. Ubuntu and Debian, they both publish CSV files where the mapping is listed. As far as I understand, not all distributions do that, which is a big problem. Also, once you have this knowledge, it can be out of date fairly soon, right? If Debian releases version 16 in the next few days or in the next few weeks, the knowledge in your matching logic is outdated now, which is a problem. So what we are planning to do before we publish version 4.14 of Dependency-Track is that during OSV mirroring, when we import the advisories, right, we enrich the pearls with the distro qualifier if it is not already present, which means that, for example, Debian 13 becomes the distro qualifier Debian-13. If there's Ubuntu and Ubuntu says Ubuntu Focal, we translate it to Ubuntu-24.04. Sorry, 20.04, I think is the correct version. And then during vulnerability analysis, if both the component that we are analyzing and the affected Perl have a distro qualifier in them, we only perform the actual version comparison if the distro qualifiers match, right? And we apply some best effort normalization so that, again, if we get Ubuntu 24.4, I think this is actually wrong. This should be 20.04. Then it also matches a Perl that says focal, right? But this, again, is kind of best effort because the knowledge that we have can be out of date. There can be drift, if you will. We try to do as much as we can, possibly. We're testing this currently with bombs generated by CDXGen, by Sift, and by Trivy. I actively tested so far with Sift and Trivy, and for both of them, it seems to work. They both use the distro qualifier reliably. They both use the same format for the distributions, which is helpful. And of course, if you have capacity, if you're interested, you can help with testing. This is published as a feature branch, which means there's a container image available that you can use to test locally. There is more information in the pull request linked here. If you can contribute something, if it's just like uploading a few bombs of your company or of your projects to your own little test instance, that would be of much help. Yeah, but that's something we definitely want to nail, or at least lessen the current pain of over-reporting before we release version 4.14.0. As for Telemetry Insights, just like last time, the version distribution, what was positively surprising is that since last month, we have an increase of over 800 new instances, unique instances that are checking in each day. And we are still seeing that most people are on the latest version or on the almost latest version, right? We can already see here 4.13.6 is the current latest version. Most of the users that are reporting in are on that version already. And in total, we crossed for the first time the 6,000 unique instances checking in, which is quite cool to see. Update for version 5. One change we made is we modified the release process such that we can support pre-releases now. For example, version 0.7.0-alpha1 or -RC, whatever. And the purpose really is that we have already started publishing one of them, the alpha 0 version, and we will publish new pre-releases every 1 to 2 weeks. The purpose here is that as we make more and more changes towards the GA release, we cannot always guarantee that the current state in the main branch is workable, right? Or is stable enough to use. So if you are running test instances, I would highly encourage you to only jump between the pre-release versions now until we hit GA. Otherwise, there can always be situations where you deploy a snapshot version and your system might not work. Let's put it that way. So if you run test instances, please use the pre-release versions. And of course, we publish container images for them, just like for normal releases. We removed the Kafka requirement for notification publishing. So previously, all the notifications submitted by the system were directly published to Kafka. That is no longer the case. There is a new architecture which is documented here. You can still publish to Kafka, but you have to explicitly configure it. It just becomes one of the publishers that we support next to email, webhook, etc., etc. The notification publisher service that we previously had has been decommissioned. Deleting code is always fun, and this was quite a bit of code, so that was especially fun. Last time I showed a few screenshots for using managed secrets in the UI. We improved that a bit. I will show some more screenshots about that in a few moments. And we also added the ability to test integration configuration in the UI, which I think has been one of the earliest issues we have in the Dependency-Track repository, where someone was asking, hey, I want to use OSS index. I provided my credentials. How do I know if it works or not? And now there's a, let's say, centralized solution in Dependency-Track that enables just testing what you have configured in the UI, and you get a little bit of feedback. One of the things that has enabled us to move away from Kafka for notification publishing is that publishing is now implemented as a workflow. I talked about how we implement workflows, or how we have implemented workflows in the previous meetings. I don't want to bother you with this again. But one of the benefits now that we have is we can surface this information to you in the UI. If you are an administrator, you can now see the workflows that were executed on the system. For now, you can filter on their status, on their name, when they completed, when they were started, etc., etc. There are obviously more ways we can allow you to filter, but this is it for now. And now you can see what is going on in your system, right? You don't have to always check the logs, which is a nice usability bonus, I think. For this, what we will be adding soon, although with a lower priority, just because it's not adding to the overall mission of Dependency-Track, right? But it will come, is a detail view where you can inspect the history of each workflow. So you can see the errors that happened or the results that have been returned by steps in the workflow or by the workflow itself. There will be controls to pause, resume, cancel, or even delete entire workflow runs. So if something gets stuck, you can manage that directly from the administrator UI. And basically, potentially some basic graphs for distribution of statuses. So you can see how many workflows are currently pending, how many are running, how many have been completed. You should be able to see the depth of task queues. So you can see under how much load your system is currently. And possibly also controls to pause and resume task queues. So if you are, let's say you have planned maintenance, you don't want asynchronous tasks to continue running while you do your maintenance, you can just pause the queues and no asynchronous tasks will be processed anymore. And you will also be able to adjust the sizes of task queues if you need to increase concurrency in your entire cluster. That will also be possible. I mentioned managed secrets. And this is what I showed last time. The idea was that you manage your secrets centrally in Dependency-Track. I will not show the UI again here. Refer to the last community meeting for that. But the intention was that once you have the secrets managed centrally, you should then be able to just refer to them in the configuration screens, right? And this is what I was showing. The idea was that you would use expressions similar to GitHub Actions or many CI systems, where you would then reference secrets by name, right? And this works, but it has a big UX drawback, and that is non-technical users specifically, they will not know where they can use expressions. And this input obviously also does not show you which secrets are available to you, right? So while this works, populating these fields is not good UX for newcomers, for non-technical people, or even for, like, to be honest, for myself, I also find it quite annoying. So, whoops. So what is happening now is, or what we did since then, is now every single field where you can use managed secrets, it will have a key symbol next to the label, and it will say select a secret. And you can type in it, and it will give you suggestions as to which secret you could use. It will show up to 6 matching secrets in a dropdown. You can see here I typed Git, and it shows me GitHub Advisories token. Secrets can also have a description, so you see the description right here. And once you have selected it, you saved your configuration. Let's say someone evil comes around, they delete the secret from your secret management solution. It will also show you, hey, this secret does not exist anymore. And obviously you cannot enter a secret that doesn't exist to begin with, right? So there's much more guidance as to what values you can input here. And if something is misconfigured, it will show it better or surface this information. Also, as I mentioned, for the testing functionality, there is now there will be a testing button for integration configurations, where when you click it, a little pop-up will appear, and every single integration can define multiple so-called steps. In this case, this is for the NVD integration. It has a step for connection testing and one for feed format testing. So it will check, can I connect to the URL that you have configured? But also, are the files present at that location actually what I expect? In this case, you can see passed because I configured the correct URL. But if let's say I pointed to a local host, you can see it slightly here in the background where I pointed it to localhost port 8085. It now says for the connection, hey, you cannot connect to local hosts. And then it skipped the feed format. Similarly, if you like configure example.com or whatever, it will say the feed format is not what I expected, but the connection succeeded. And this, of course, will also work for email configuration, for Kafka configuration, for OSS index, and so on and so forth. So now you finally get feedback to your configuration that you made in the UI. Seems like a kind of a simple feature to have, but it was not trivial to implement, surprisingly. Some notes on this: you can test your configuration before you save it, which I think is important, right? You don't want, while you're playing around with the configuration, you don't want to impact your running system. So you don't have to save the configuration beforehand. And you saw it before, I entered a localhost address and it said, hey, you cannot connect to this. And this is to prevent SSRF, right? Server-side request forgery. Functionality like this, where you can provide a custom URL and then try to connect to it. Sadly, this is a vector for SSRF, right? You could use it to scan for open ports on the local host, or you could scan for open ports on the local network. Let's say your cloud environment has a few VMs running, and someone could use this to probe what is available. So per default, you cannot connect to local hosts, but an administrator with access to environment variables or a configuration file can allow this. So if you need to, for whatever reason, connect to local systems, you can do it, but it's just not allowed per default. You also saw the test results. They're kind of vague, like this. They say, hey, connection succeeded, or hey, connection failed. Feed file format not as expected. What you will not get is information like, hey, this connection didn't work, and this is what the service that I tried to connect to has returned, right? This would be, again, kind of a vulnerability. So the results are vague on purpose. They shouldn't disclose internal information. but they give you enough information to decide if your configuration is valid or not. For more detailed stuff, you will still need to check the logs. And that, again, is fully on purpose. Also, not all integrations have this yet, but they will have before the GA release. So by then, we should have better coverage. What we are currently doing is we are also dropping the Kafka requirement for vulnerability analysis, which at the moment is also a separate service. It is already to, let's say, 45% done, roughly. It will also be moved to workflow, so you will also be able to see it in the UI as an administrator, see what went wrong, what failed, what didn't fail, what succeeded. The associated service will also be decommissioned, and we are going to set up an internal dependency-track instance for version 5 for our team, specifically for dog fooding, so we become our own customer, right? We also want to have this work for our use cases. Yeah, and that is one of the plans that we have for the short term. We are still aiming for becoming GA by end of this quarter. That is the ambitious goal. And that's it. Any questions? I think I saw someone posting in the chat. You see. Valeria asks, could you access metadata endpoints such as 169.254, 169.254? I think this should be covered by the is local check. So it not only checks is local host, but also local and linked local addresses. I will double check, but this should be covered. So you would have to enable this by, or an administrator would have to enable this so you can connect to it.
Yeah, cool. Watch out because there are a lot of permutations to bypass this block list.
Yeah, it's not a block list really. It's just resolving the address, right, to an IP address.
Ah, right. So it is not regex. It is resolving and then matching against what has been resolved. Fantastic.
Yeah. There's this is a Java implementation, obviously. So the Java standard library has an implementation for this where you can just say, hey, given this address, is this local? Is this not local? Is this linked local? Is this any local? And it appears to be, I will not say bulletproof maybe, but it appears to be fine. Yep. But I will double check for this specific address. Alrighty, any more questions? Otherwise, we can close soon. 3, 2, 1. Sold. Then thanks for your attention, and hopefully see you next time. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.